a large reason why I don't carry a firearm is due to the fact of how I present myself and my acknowledgement of some of the stereotypes people may think when they look at me, being a black man that has dreadlocks and I'm covered in tattoos. And I'm not willing to give up my individuality nor push away my culture. And I was wondering do you think the way that I speak and carry myself in everyday life is something that could help me out of a potential profiling situation?
Well, not to be a politician and buy time, but like genuinely good question, because I had something like similar that I wanted to talk about.
I figured we might have a little bit of crossover in there.
So I think that racial discrimination amongst law enforcement is absolutely a thing. Absolutely.
Yeah.
How that narrative then gets used by the media and by other organizations is a different thing, but does it exist? Absolutely. I make the joke all the time at the shop that, me driving down I literally made the joke to you today.
Right.
Plates. Yeah, I'm comfortable to drive down the road with machine guns and suppressors that I sign out from the shop that is a gray area as far as the ATF and the NFA is concerned.
Right.
I'm very comfortable doing that and speeding and doing what I'm going to do.
Mm-hmm.
I have been pulled over with a year-old inspection sticker with gun cases and firearms in the back seat, and the cop didn't even ask me about them.
Right.
That would not be the same experience for you, no matter how you phrased yourself or held yourself.
Right.
I do think that the way that you hold yourself and the way that you present yourself to the world matters most out of anything, though.
I agree.
And I think that is something that, I don't want to say annoys me about like black culture, but there's a part of that that's never like taken as like a tough criticism.
Right.
That if inside the culture what you say is cool is the thug life.
Right.
So then you have young guys that go out and emulate the thug life, not only in dress, but then also in behavior and how they present themselves.
Right.
You present yourself as a criminal. So when those law enforcement guys are dealing with guys that look exactly like you and act exactly like you, that have guns and drugs in the car, then they interact with you and you present yourself in the same manner, you're going to be treated in the same way.
Right.
But I think that you have generations of that now with the rise of hip-hop culture and a lot of the negative stuff that came with it.
Sure.
I think that you have generations now on both sides of that aren't going to change.
Right.
And honestly, like if you were law enforcement inside of like Detroit,
mm-hmm.
there's no way that you can do that job effectively without profiling, right? You have to be profiling, looking for the criminal personality and mindset,
mm-hmm.
and ultimately that there's going to be a racial component that goes with that. And
right.
I always use like the Middle East as kind of an example. If you were a TSA guy immediately following 9/11 to do your job effectively, you were profiling.
Right.
Like it just was what it was.
Yeah, because if not, you'd probably get fired. Like in the grand scheme of things,
yeah.
People like whoever's
100%.
looking over your shoulder is like.
So like as far as
did you properly check him? Like,
I know we're at like our break point, but as far as like. I think that one of the most important things that you could do is to keep all of the things that make you you and all of the things that support your culture and all of the things that express who you are. And if you want to carry.
mm-hmm.
Because I think the thing that will change that narrative is rather than being afraid of it, to run square on into it and change that narrative. Because the more guys that look like you, that present themselves like you, that carry themselves like you, not only in how professional and respectful you are and well phrased you are, but in the fact that like you are tattooed and you do have dreads and you have the style that goes along with kind of the thuggish. I mean, not 100%. You look like Soldier Boy, but like
right, yeah.
You get what I'm getting at?
Yeah, sure.
The more guys that look like you, that act like you, that carry a gun, that present themselves in the way that you present yourself, it changes that narrative for law enforcement also.
Totally.
Because there is a part of me that goes out to law enforcement, but. If we could go down a whole route on that, I think that law enforcement and the way that our criminal justice system works inside the United States is massively screwed up. And I think it, without a doubt, targets the black community. But I think it goes much higher than just the individual officer. I think
mm-hmm.
it goes all the way through your legislation and stuff. When you start looking at mandatory minimum sentencing and things that came out in the 90s through
100%.
Through Biden, through Hillary Clinton that pushed for the mandatory minimum sentencing, that's when you started seeing the mass takeaway of like the fathers out of the black community.
Right.
Because now you had guys that were just trying to survive inside
mm-hmm.
of the environment they're in. They're just trying to feed their kids.
Right.
get caught with a minimal amount of drugs and get sentenced to 10 years.
Exactly.
Once you do 10, there's no fixing that. You're stuck in a loop.
You don't come back and get a good job
loop
to support your family. That's not really realistic,
and,
and your family is already so disadvantaged after that's happened, right?
Because you're gone for 10 years,
That's
right?
already one income out of the window, right?
And
so
if you're in that community, there's already
food
limited
stamps
income
or whatever it may be.
It just gets worse and worse and worse.
And that creates that cycle again of why a lot of black communities may have, a high crime rate, is because,
fatherless homes. I mean,
fatherless homes. So no good leader, no one to set a good example. But then on top of that, if the money and resources aren't available to you, I mean, some people are willing to make certain steps that might not be the moral steps, but they're the ones just to get by, right? Like something like selling drugs. People look at it a certain way, but sometimes,
and if your dad did 10 years, you don't know that your dad is trying to change his life. You don't know his backstory at all.
Right.
You as a kid just saw, like, this is what my daddy did, and you follow in his footsteps.
Right.
And once you start down that road, the people that you interact with, those true people that are just predators by birth, you interact with those people all of a sudden, and now, man, you're stuck in that loop so bad.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's kind of my opinion about it. I could continue down the criminal justice system for a while. That was when I was going to school. That was one of the things I wrote all my papers on. Was
gotcha.
If you look at recidivism rates for anybody, it doesn't matter what your background is. If you do time inside of like a juvenile detention facility around the age of 13 or 14, your percentage to be a felon, like a life sentence felon, by the time you're in your 30s is like 90%. Same for if you're arrested around 17 and 18, then your percentage is like 70%.
Right.
And it's purely because you get stuck in that loop.
Exactly.
And you're young enough, when you're young enough inside of it, that you drink the Kool-Aid from those adult predators that are around you that get you to do the crimes, that
building
get you to do
habits,
the work.
and making you think that those habits may be normal.
Yeah. Well, you can look at any gang. To be a part of the gang, you got to do your work.
Right.
The part that gets left out of that is the people that are doing the work are kids. It's a psychological attempt to recruit them into the business.
Right.
And then once you're there and you've got a couple of charges, man, what else do you do?
Right.
And that's completely ignoring the fact that there's a vacuum of fathers, the guys that are still in the community that are kind of de facto father leaders, like they fill that father role, are the guys that are out there doing that on the street. So like, man, when I was a young kid, if I grew up in a neighborhood like that, I would have been sucked into it. I went out of my way, having gone to a private Christian school. I got kicked out and went to public school. I went out of my way to get involved in that culture of that stuff. Like, if I had grown up directly around it, 100%. You know, it looks exciting, man.
Right.
And especially like if you have roaches in your house and like you're not eating and you're like legitimately, like the way Baltimore is right now, that place is a war zone.
And it looks like a way out when you're in that situation, right? And I did some reading literally just this morning, right? And it was talking about how obviously there's higher crime rates in like gang populated areas. Well, these gang populated areas tend to be the over policed areas. And on top of that, the reasons why gangs are so strong in those areas is because when there's over policing, that leads for the community to not trust the police system. Which then means who has your back? Who's going to have your back? Your gang.
And
your gang has your back in that situation. So how do you break that loop? It almost feels like you can't in that situation, when the people who are supposed to protect you in that scenario, you don't feel like you can trust them. And so they fall into the gang loop.
You take those cops and put them inside the schools as resource officers, which is like, they got to be there because there's shootings all the time, which is never talked about. Those are always thrown into the mass shooting, but you have kids like legitimately bringing guns to school, and like there are issues. So you got to have like an actual police officer there to deal with that stuff. But then you get the videos where they're like slamming 8-year-olds because that's a punishment for a cop that already got in trouble for something on the street. They punish him by making him be the resource officer. So he's in there with a bad attitude already. He's already got an issue because he's a dude that's getting in trouble. And he's mad, right?
He wants to take it out somewhere somehow.
And he lets, some, like my daughter at 11, she's 5'5", man. She gets an attitude and gets in your face. Like, it's tough, dude. It's tough not to get like aggressive back.
Okay, like hold up.
You stack all those chips against somebody and let a little kid get in his face.
It's
slam a 12-year-old, man.
Right. It's a lot of pressure on you in that situation, because I'm sure when they're put in that school, they're already feeling like their higher ups are waiting for them to mess up again, just so they can get them out. Right.
Yeah. Which is, dude, I could keep going down this road.
Yeah.
The politics inside those community service jobs where like you rise to the top by selling out people around you. It's a proven system and it's dangerous because you run into stuff like that. But you want to take a quick break?
We'll check totally. We can do that.
Get back on it.
All right.